had a certain something.
Billy Joe was just gifted. I mean, God reached down, he touched him, and he said, this is what you're gonna do.
Music was Mike's life.
That was the only thing he ever really wanted.
When Trey came on, he took him to the next level. And I was like, this is gonna be huge.
They chased one goal relentlessly.
We'd go to ridiculous extremes to play.
It was all about drinking beer, playing rock, and kicking ass.
Welcome to paradise. They found punk, and it was like, stand back, this is where my life is.
Through struggles,
our father walked in and told us that he had cancer.
The fighting that Michael saw, I think all kids, when that happens, have a sense of anger.
Trey was going through just a really tough divorce.
and setbacks.
The scene that they came from frowned upon success.
A lot of hardcore punk fans turned their backs on it.
It's always been them against the world.
Some people are just driven. 3 punk rockers' defiant pursuit of superstardom.
They always wanted to go to the next step.
They introduced kids to punk rock who didn't know they liked punk rock.
They were like, we're doing what we want to do, and if you don't like it, that's your problem.
Never before seen images, stories, and revelations from the people who know what really happened.
Green Day stopped talking, and there was that breakdown.
I don't think Billy Joe felt like he was able to share his songs without being criticized.
I walk a lonely road.
The light bulb went off in Billy's head, and he said, maybe I should go solo.
Because they lived it with them.
They had to relearn how to be friends with each other.
When that happened, the floodgates opened.
Don't wanna be an American idiot.
They said, you know what, we're the greatest rock band in the world, and we're gonna prove it.
This is Driven Green Day.
Billy Joe Armstrong was born in Oakland, California, February 17th, 1972. Welcome to paradise. Billy is the youngest of 6 kids.
He was coddled and taken care of quite well by all of his siblings, and because he was so sweet and cute, everybody just loved him. We moved to Rodeo in 1976, and Billy Joe was about 4.
Rodeo was really kind of this boring working class town about 15 miles away from Berkeley, and kind of a nasty part of the East Bay here in San Francisco.
My father's name was Andrew Marcicano Armstrong.
He was a truck driver, an ex-Golden Glove boxer, strong as an ox.
His father was like the patriarch. He had a big presence.
My stepfather, Billy's dad, was a drummer. He was a really good jazz drummer.
He played in bands, and so there was always music in our house.
My mom and stepdad always encouraged the kids. They all had music lessons.
But Billy Joe sucked most of the musical talent out of my parents. He started playing music around 4. He started with singing.
1, 2, 3.
He cut a record called Look for Love.
Look for love, look for love, look for love.
He had a really sweet voice, and on the backside, the B-side, is an interview with him.
Billy Joe, you've just made your very first record. How does it feel?
Wonderful. I love it.
And he would tour in sort of like a traveling show with other performers, and my father would play drums.
Billy's dad and him, they were real tight. There was a definite bond there.
Our family was a real cohesive unit, real loving, a lot of laughter. But we kind of lost the family structure. You know, it kind of disappeared and crumbled around us.
It was like the first week of school. I remember being, a brand new year.
We were sitting at the kitchen table, and my father walked in, and he looked at my mother, and he started crying. And they went back into the back room, and then later came out and told us that he had cancer.
Summer has come and passed. The innocent can never last. When we found out my stepdad was sick, it was very emotional. You knew he was dying because he was a big, strong man, and you could see him just withering away slowly.
And within 4 months, he had died. And it was pretty devastating.
Drenched in my pain again.
My father was only 54 at the time, and Billy Joe was 10.
It was pretty hard for him because, you're in 5th grade, and all of a sudden your dad's gone, What do you do with that? It's your dad. He's gone.
After my stepdad died, everything changed. Mom had to work harder, so Mom didn't get to spend as much time with Billy.
She went to work and she told us, let's move forward and let's not talk about this. And so it left a lot of stuff unsaid and a lot of emotions not experienced.
Billy, after his dad died, I think he immersed himself a lot in music.
It was pretty overwhelming for him, not having the words or a way to communicate. So that's when he got his first guitar.
That's what kept him going. It was like, I'm gonna do this for my dad. So let me focus all my energy in this direction.
And it just came organically for him.
The guy was just gifted. I mean, God reached down, he touched him, and he said, this is what you're gonna do.
It was shortly after that, him and Mike hooked up. They were around 11.
They were inseparable, playing music together, hanging out together.
Mike was really kind of a spastic, skinny character.
Skinny, hyper, obnoxious, and funny, like all at once.
My son's name is Michael Ryan Pritchard, and he was born in Oakland, California on May 4th, 1972. I was a licensed foster home, and one day I got a phone call. It was the county, and they said they had an emergency situation. They needed to place a baby who was 6 weeks old. And I said, bring him on over. Eventually, we were able to adopt him, and that's how Michael came into my life. When Michael came to us, I was married to Patrick Pritchard. He was a student at UC Berkeley. I was a stay-at-home mom. I had another daughter who was about 4. She liked having Michael. She got to be the big sister.
He was always so cute and just had a head full of blonde hair. I was happy to have a little brother.
After we bought our first house, we upgraded. We moved to a bigger house in Elson Browning.
His first elementary was Hillview.
He got upset when he went to kindergarten and punched his teacher.
She was wanting him to do something and he didn't do it, so he was just like, pow.
He was very opinionated. It's like he just had no sense of fear, and I think that's been his attitude his whole life. Just go for it. We were a close family. Patrick and I had been together for quite a few years, but when it went bad, it just went bad. Michael was about 6 or 7 when we split up.
Michael went with my dad and I stayed with my mom. That was hard. I missed my brother a lot. My mom wanted us together, but my dad wasn't really letting that happen.
I think it was really hard on him, just the tearing up of the family. There was one very big scene between his father and I that was really especially ugly.
My brother was like in 3rd grade and he was coming over to stay for the weekend and my mother and father started fighting. Both of us ran out of the house screaming and then the police came.
I ended up having to go to court to get Michael and Mila back together, and they ended up both with me.
My brother stayed with us from then on.
The fighting that he saw, I think all kids, when that happens, have a sense of anger.
He didn't talk a whole lot about that. He was probably hiding a lot of pain.
I think Michael kind of shut himself down to where he couldn't hear or see it. He kept everything inside of him.
He started playing the guitar probably about a year after I got divorced.
Michael started practicing a lot all the time. I mean, he could never get the guitar out of his hand.
He'd come home from school, and instead of going out and play with the other kids, he spent all his spare time in his bedroom listening to music and playing it.
Not therapeutic.
A lot of his expression came out in his music. It was in him. It was in him, and it just came out. It was around that time I found a 3-bedroom house in Rodeo.
Michael started 4th grade at Carquinez Middle School. That's when he met Billy.
The thing that connected them together was the music. They were both into the music, and they were both playing the lead guitar.
The equipment was set up in our living room permanently. And my mom allowed them to play and practice all the time.
Billy found somebody that played drums, and he took me and just told me what to do on bass.
No, actually, you're supposed to play it up here, like right here.
He told Mike what to do on guitar.
Okay, follow me on guitar, okay?
Just started playing songs.
1, 2, 3, 4.
It was all about Motley Crue, Van Halen, Kiss, of course.
Standard 8th grade rock stuff.
Talk about perfect. Talk about show.
At first, they were, they'd do cover tunes until Billy started writing his own stuff. Then it just went wild.
Please welcome Billy.
His presence, his just confidence, he always had that. I just remember thinking like, holy crap, this guy's amazing.
Billy Joe started writing songs, and Sweet Children was one of the songs.
Say children.
And they named themselves after that song.
That's when Michael started picking up the bass.
So they kicked me out of the band pretty much because I sucked.
Billy taught Mike his first bass licks, and then Mike just took to it.
In high school, he couldn't bring his bass to school, and so he would sit around and go dirt, 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 and that's how he got the name Dirt.
Music was Mike's life. He always had that outward positive attitude, but he was going through hard times.
My mother was broke. She was working like 3 jobs to survive.
It took everything I had just to get the bills paid and the rent paid.
And then she lost the house. My mother wanted to leave the Bay Area. She just couldn't afford it anymore. But Michael didn't want to leave.
By then, him and Billy were well on their way to getting the band together. That was the only thing he ever really wanted.
He knew that that was going to be his life. He was going to make music his life.
It was hard on Michael. He loved the music, he was talented, but I had to go.
This is toast. When Mike was 15 years old, his mom decided to move out of Rodale.
Michael didn't want to leave.
Mike decided to stay and do his own thing.
He went to stay at Billy's, and that was fine with me because I knew it was a good, safe place for him to be.
Mike moved into the garage, and he became a part of our family. He was like another son to my mom and another brother to us.
By then, him and Billy were well on their way to getting the band together, and music was everything.
They would come home from school and play on the weekends.
They definitely had talent, and I realized they're more than just a garage band.
Billy and Mike were 15 years old when they started to go to Gilman.
Ladies, Gilman Street was the last vestige of punk.
It was in the warehouse district of West Berkeley.
It was just an all-ages club with a lot of kids just really having a good time.
It was punk rockers, it was sort of misfits.
The kind of kids that just didn't fit in that well at their schools.
At that time, Billy Joe was trying to find his own way, breaking from the family a little bit, creating his own community.
He was really more into, wanting to make music and be around more people who were into being completely and totally different.
I don't think he found his place in school, but at the Gilman, he found his soulmates in music and lifestyle and philosophy.
They found punk, and it was like, stand back, this is where my life is.
But they weren't immediately welcomed into the mainstream punk scene.
In the beginning, as Sweet Children, they were not accepted.
The Gilman wouldn't let them play. They said they weren't punk enough.
There was some resistance initially because people weren't used to stuff that didn't sound as mean.
They were just a lot poppier than a lot of the bands.
Around that time, John Kiffmeyer joined the band.
John Kiffmeyer, he was in a band called Isocracy, and they were a pretty big local band, and Billy used to go see them play, and one thing led to another. John ended up being their drummer.
He gave them some more street cred.
John helped them get shows at Gilman.
He was definitely the element that they needed at that time.
These new bands that were playing shows at Gilman Street every weekend were on this label Lookout.
Lookout Records was just starting to get some brand recognition, you know, with local punk rockers.
So John called me up and said, hey, I got this new band called Sweet Children and we want to play. And I said, well, there's some stupid high school party next weekend. And John said, we'll be there. I was just transfixed right from the start. It was like Billy was a star already, and it was like seeing the Beatles play at Shea Stadium. As soon as they were finished, I said, well, I want to make a record with you guys. Billy was like, yeah, cool.
Around that time, they decided to change their name to Green Day.
They changed their name about 2 weeks before the first EP was going to come out. I just blew a gasket and said, you can't do that. What the hell does Green Day mean?
Green Day is a song about smoking weed all day long, and that's where the name came from.
I said, everybody knows you as Sweet Children. You're nuts. But once they decided something, that's how it went. The first EP came out in April of 1988. It was called 1,000 Hours. And it was about a year later when they came out with their first album, which was called 39 Smooth.
Once the record came out, there started to be a real buzz about them.
We sold out the pressing of 1,000 and repressed it.
Billy Joe is like, whoa, there's actually people out there who want to hear my music.
Billy and Mike were 18 when we first released 39 Smooth.
I remember being in high school with Billy Joe. School didn't interest him. He was sitting in class writing songs. He was really more into, wanting to make music.
Billy Joe ended up not graduating from high school. He didn't receive his diploma.
My mom, she'd love her kids to finish school. She would all like us to go to college and be professors or doctors.
But I also think that she believed in him as a musician, that he had a place to go other than school.
Mike always did good in school as far as being able to, stay with it and go to class.
He wanted to complete high school to make my mother and father proud.
Mike graduated from Pinole Valley in May of '90, and the day after he graduated, they went on tour for like a 45-day tour.
They got their own van and they took off.
They'd go to ridiculous extremes to play. They would play anywhere.
Here we go again.
Half of these shows are shows that are in people's basements and at people's houses.
Sometimes they got a place to sleep and a meal, and that was their pay.
It was incredible, the support system and the network that was within the scene throughout the country. You realize there's so many towns out there with kids that were just like you.
Billy was like, I was in Ohio, and they knew the words to my songs. So it was enlightenment and also motivator for him to keep moving forward.
By that time, they were starting to get pretty popular, but everything was about to change.
John Kiffmeyer decided to leave the band to pursue his education and attend college away from the Bay Area.
To him, being in a band was more about having fun.
John just thought it was time, for a change.
I think the boys are really hurt by that.
Billy and Mike, for about the last 7 or 8 years, that's all they'd done was play music. They had no other skills that they knew of. It was just like incomprehensible to them that you walk away from something like that.
They were really close to breaking up when John left.
John was a real anchor to the band, and they were a bit scared about what was going to happen.
Log on to VH1.
Green Day's first album, 39 Smooth, was released in 1990.
Soon after, John Kiffmeyer decided to leave the band to pursue his education.
As much as they were angry with him for what they saw as deserting the band, I think they were probably really as well.
It was unfortunate, but they were going to move on. Mike and Billy were going to be a band, one way or the other.
Shortly thereafter, they met up with Trey.
He was playing with Larry's band, the Lookouts.
I said maybe you guys should try jamming together.
And as soon as they played with Trey a few times, it was obvious the magic was there. And they just flowed like gravy. It was perfect.
Trey Cool, known also as Frank Evan Wright III, was born in Frankfurt, Germany, 9 December 1972.
My brother, Trey, was a really cute baby, and old ladies used to come up and, oh, look at this beautiful baby girl. And he would kick them.
I was in the military at the time, and when I got out of the Army, we moved up here in the mountains north of Laytonville. It's about 3.5 hours north of San Francisco. It's kind of a mix of sort of back to the land hippies, crazy mountain people, cowboys.
We didn't have electricity or TV or cartoons, but Trey actually liked it. He could, you know, run around and make as much noise as he wanted.
The great evil, train evil, will now attempt to scare the horses to death.
He was loud, rowdy, you know, big mouth, always putting on an act.
You go up to somebody on Fifth Avenue and you say, hello, chump, do you have AIDS? Cut!
He was a handful. Larry Livermore was our neighbor up on the mountains.
When I was a kid, I always thought of him as this wild kind of punk rock guy.
I was trying to have a punk rock band, so I needed a drummer. There was a lot of musicians there, but they were mostly hippie musicians, and they hated the kind of music we were trying to play. So I figured the only way was to get one of the kids that just didn't really have any preconceptions.
He needed a drummer really bad, so he said, hey, kid, how about these? As soon as he got on the drums, he just took off.
Trey was only 11 or 12 years old at the time. He drummed on everything. Any surface was his drum. In the car, it was like, could you please quit that?
He got to where he could play the drums pretty good.
I'd say within a month or two, we're pretty sure we had a band.
And that's how they formed the band, The Lookouts.
Oh, you'll remember this for the rest of your life.
We're a punk rock band, and we all had to have punk names, and Trey Cool was just obvious, it seemed to me. I'd had a little bit of French, so why not?
He loved it. Oh, he thought, I'm a rock star now.
Once Trey got into high school, he was pretty serious about his drums.
I could tell he had something going for him that was really special.
He had the talent, he had the will to want to do it, and he wanted to get out of school a little early and start music and move away.
I understood it right away, and so did his mother, that if he was going to make music a career, he had to leave this little town.
They realized there was no point in sticking it out for graduation. He knew he wasn't going to really do college as far as being an accountant. I mean, what would he possibly do other than drums? Trey dropped out early, and then from there went straight to Berkeley.
There was this music community forming, and there was tons of opportunities.
Trey just kind of started getting to know everybody.
He was just the most outgoing human being you can imagine. Really the class clown of the punk scene.
Trey had met Billy and Mike at Gilman and hung out with them a while.
They were looking for a drummer at the time, and Trey just happened to be at the right place at the right time.
Trey was just such a great drummer and so perfectly fit with those guys.
Like a glove.
When Trey came on, he took him to the next level.
I kind of knew at that point there was no chance that the Lookouts were going to keep going. I knew that if they succeeded, it would do us a lot of good at the label as well. I started the record label, Lookout Records, and in the spring of 1991, I sent them into the studio.
Kerplunk was 3 days with a budget of about $1,100. You know, load in at 10 in the morning, work till 2 a.m.
Let's just do it as quick and cheap as we can.
I heard literally like a few seconds of the first chords, and I knew this was like an album way beyond anything we'd done before.
Kerplunk was released in January of 1992.
The day it came out, we sold out the whole pressing at 10,000, which in those days was unheard of. I mean, the biggest album we'd ever had before, it sold 2,000 in a whole year.
Kerplunk was a killer record that really kind of marked Green Day's arrival as like a staple of the punk scene.
By the end of '92, they could do tours where they were playing pretty big places all over the country.
They were selling out Gilman Street every time they played and selling out some other clubs that were bigger than Gilman Street.
They toured all over Europe.
And they came back and they looked completely different. They weren't kids with backwards baseball hats anymore. You know, they had tattoos and biker boots. They looked like rock stars. They're selling out clubs, but the records were not in the stores.
I don't think Lookout could keep up with the demand for Green Day anymore.
That's when they started getting a lot of attention from the more mainstream press and from the bigger record labels.
5 or 6 different major labels were trying to get their attention all at the same time, and it kind of created a bidding war.
Billy was totally blown away. He had no idea that people had been watching him, you know, and they knew how good he was.
The band realized we need to go the step farther. They had so outgrown their world that they came from.
But the scene that they came from frowned upon success.
In the punk rock scene, it's always been kind of a given that if you sign to a major label, you're considered a sellout.
How could you not be conflicted in that situation? I mean, you know, a 22-year-old kid making the biggest decision of his life, you know, and knowing you're going to leave certain people behind.
But they were high school dropouts, and this was their big chance. They were sort of like, F it.
Green Day signed to Reprise in '93.
The next thing I know, we were in the studio, and they made a good, raw, like, hard-driving punk record.
They were making a huge leap to, you know, kerplunk the Dookie. You know, larger studio, spending more time. I had a producer.
And I was like, oh my God, I think we have something here. The record came out in February of 1994.
And Dookie Mania hit.
Just turned everything up to 10.
Every time you turned on MTV, you'd see Green Day.
Longview went to #1, and I remember going to them, guys, you're blowing up, and it's huge. They were kind of speechless.
Billy met Adrian on the first tour.
We started talking on the phone, and we became friends over the phone.
Billy started to fall in love with Adrian, but they couldn't be together because of distance.
He asked me to come out for the summer, and when I got out here, he said, let's get married.
Today is the first day of the rest of our lives.
We put our wedding together in less than 2 weeks. It's quite the whirlwind. We got married, found out I was pregnant, and then he left for tour.
Green Day had the opening slot on Lollapalooza that year.
But, you know, they felt a little out of place on Lollapalooza. The older bands were kind of like, you know, who are these guys? Why is everybody going so nuts over them?
Perry Farrell's responsible for starting Lollapalooza, and Green Day didn't get respect from him.
Perry Farrell didn't want us on the bill anymore because he thought that we were some band that some corporation put together or something. You know, we knew where we come from, and, you know, we don't need to really explain it to anybody.
It came to the point in the Lollapalooza tour when Green Day was definitely ready to move on, and that's when they did the first Woodstock reunion.
It was like, holy you're playing Woodstock, man. They flew in out of helicopter and looked down at that crowd, and they went, wow, this is crazy.
It was a very rainy morning. Green Day comes on stage, and it is a mess.
They got out there, they played, they rocked really hard, and they figured make the most of it, and they just started a big mud war.
This isn't love and peace, it's anarchy.
When Billy Joe put the mud in his mouth, I mean, I knew it was going to just escalate.
Everybody was covered in mud. Eventually, fans started jumping up on stage.
A security guard mistook Mike for an audience member, and he ran up and tackled him. And Mike went over onto a monitor and broke out his front teeth.
Hey, calm down, man. Look, we're just trying to have a little fun, rock and roll.
It was, at that point, it turned into, oh my God, we have to get safe. And we immediately got in helicopters. It was scary. It was like the truest rock and roll moment you could possibly ask for.
Woodstock 94 was just Green Day's show.
It was just a huge success for them, and it was really covered in the media.
Woodstock made Green Day a traveling riot. That's it. Mob scene, everywhere they played.
All of a sudden, we were selling 400,000 records a week.
Dookie sold 10 million records, which is huge. That's diamond.
I am one of those melodramatic fools.
It was scaring Billy. that it was selling so many records.
It now became a broader cultural thing, and it became something that actually crossed over to pop.
They introduced kids to punk rock who didn't know they liked punk rock.
Sometimes my mind plays tricks on me.
And they started worrying about losing their fan base. They all felt a little guilty about it.
There's always a sense of guilt that goes along with that. I mean, not just about what you left behind, but who you left behind.
When a punk band gets big, all the punks get mad.
The crowd at Gilman turned their backs on them, so that they were, they sold out.
They were exiled from the Gilman.
It affected Billy a great deal because those were his friends, and all of a sudden he's an outcast, and he didn't care about being a rock star or anything. He just wanted to play music.
Knowing what the community was to Billy and Mike and Trey, it was heartbreaking for them and for us to see it happen because the Gilman held such a place in their hearts and their lives.
It was as much their family as the family they grew up in.
I can't imagine how tough that is to have to just turn your back and walk away from something you considered your home and family.
As the sun sets on...
After Woodstock 94, Green Day definitely became a household name almost, overnight.
Green Day arrived, and there was a coronation in the press and burning at the stake in private.
There was a huge uproar in the local punk scene.
When a punk band gets big, the punk police come out. Kids can be vicious, man.
They were beaten down. They were tired. They were angry.
It was really painful, but those three really grew tighter together from that.
Right after Dookie came out, they wanted to get in and make another record.
Creatively, the band said, we want to prove to people that we are the punk rockers that we set out to be.
They really made their most abrasive, aggressive punk rock record they've ever made.
Insomniac was a departure from Dookie.
It shows their rage. It shows their anger. There's a song on there that's called 86 that deals directly with them not being welcomed back into what they thought of as their home.
They were done with what their local community had to say about them.
For them, the most punk rock thing they could do was to show that they didn't listen to anyone else.
They were like, we're doing what we want to do, and if you don't like it, that's your problem.
After Insomniac touring wrapped up, they were definitely burnt out, and they needed some time off.
It was probably about 5 months that they actually took off and didn't do Green Day.
I've been waiting a long time for this moment to come.
They're kind of working on establishing their own lives and families.
They had kids and 3 brand new wives.
We're pretty devoted to our home and our families. So it makes going on tour that much harder, yet that's what we know how to do. And if there's anything that we have to offer or to give is playing music.
It wasn't much of a break because they were back in the studio in '96 recording Nimrod.
Nimrod was the third album. That album was a level of maturity.
The mantra on that one was, no holds barred, do whatever comes.
Billy said, I got this song, and I think I might want to put it on the record. And he played us this song, and I was completely blown away.
Another turning point, a fork stuck in the road. Time grabs you by the wrist, directs you where to go.
It was the acoustic ballad, which when he first started, he would never do.
He felt like it was time that he could finally show people that side of his writing.
It's something unpredictable, but in the end is right. I hope you had the time of your life.
Good Riddance hit the airwaves, and it was off the hook.
The song took off and was huge.
Everybody related to that song.
They played it at the World Series. It was in the final episode of Seinfeld.
I hope you had the time of your life.
#1 wedding song of the year. Even though it always makes me laugh that the song is not written about hope you had the time of your life. From a good point of view, it's actually a big you. But
After that kind of big success, people, expect you to top it. So they went back in and did Warning, maybe even sooner than they kind of wanted to.
Warning was a troubling time for all of them individually and also as a group.
In any rock and roll band, it's like a marriage. You're sharing work, art, creativity, and recreational time together. So there's always going to be rocky periods.
Billy's like a workaholic, and his mind is set on, well, what am I going to write next? It's a heavy responsibility, and sometimes I think he felt like he could get more support, and negative feelings start to creep in.
I don't think Billy Joe felt like he was able to share his songs and things like that without being criticized.
I walk a lonely road, the only one that I have ever known.
He felt like, I don't know if I can share my music, I don't know if I want to do this. And then the light bulb went off in Billy's head, and he said, I don't know, maybe I should go solo. Near the end of Warning, they stopped talking.
They did break down as a group for a while.
They took a period of time off after Warning, nearly 2 years.
I'm sure that the thought crossed their mind, am I even going to be in this band anymore? What's going to happen next?
They were either going to have to break up or figure it out.
The Warning, Green Day stopped talking, and there was that breakdown.
It's easy to be in love with each other as friends, 15 years ago when it's all about drinking beer and playing rock and kicking ass.
5 records later, the question starts to be, well, who the am I now? What am I going to write about? It's a heavy responsibility. Mike and Trey know that the songs are going to come from Billy, but it's tough if somebody feels like he's pulling a lot of weight. All that stuff turns into negativity where you're like, well, it then. I don't know if I can work with these guys.
I walk this empty street on the boulevard of broken dreams.
They had to relearn how to be friends with each other.
The way to do it was to go through and uncover all the things that hadn't been said and, all the fears and the paranoia and whatever the hell it is, that are in there.
I walk alone.
Billy Joe was able to tell them about his fears and his hesitance with bringing music and ideas. And they finally were able to sort of form this bond with each other and create without feeling restricted.
I walk alone, I walk out. My shadow's only one that walks beside me. They realized that they really did inspire each other. They're 3 best friends that have been playing music together for over 15 years, and they want to do that for the rest of their lives.
There was a renewed sort of spirit that made them feel like, what, we're the greatest rock band in the world, and we're going to prove it.
Right after that, they spent a lot of time working and writing.
Green Day were holed up in a studio in Oakland.
There was a new fire in them that I had not seen before.
They just were able to meet up in this great place again and willing to bring all of their individuality to the table with confidence.
It actually was more collaborative. It was a way they could all contribute and express different parts of their personality in music.
When that happened, the floodgates opened, and they were able to create this amazing record. They found their voice to sort of really say how they feel.
Like my father's come to pass, 20 years has gone so fast.
Billy was faced with the biggest challenge of his career because it's like, can you actually put yourself out there, expose your heart and your mind to such a degree that it's shocking even to yourself? Billy Joe wrote a song called American Idiot.
We're in such a politically charged climate in the world.
There was a lot of American pride at that time, and, Dixie Chicks got in trouble for putting down President Bush.
And no punk bands were saying anything about it.
Green Day's position was, I don't want to be an American idiot. I don't want to be somebody who just follows blindly.
Don't want to be an American idiot.
Even though they did it with metaphor and they did it very poetically, they made a strong statement. And I think it was very gutsy.
Let's not blame it on my America.
That was the song which you could hang, an entire statement on. And we realized, why don't we set the bar as high as we possibly can and actually turn this into a punk rock opera?
They had the idea to make a whole story around like a concept record.
It's actually songs that go in order that all add up to a particular statement.
They didn't know how it was going to be received, but I know for themselves they felt like really proud of what they had done.
There's no question that they took a big risk making a punk rock opera.
They were putting everything on the line for this record, creatively and personally. It pushed their personal relationships to the breaking point.
Trey was going through just a really tough divorce.
And then, Mike's relationship fell apart.
And there was some strain between Billy and Adrian because he just had to put his whole mind, body, heart, and soul into making the record.
I think it challenged us to a new level. It pushed us pretty far, the farthest I ever want to go.
There were definitely times I remember looking at the band looking at me and kind of going like, is this torture worth this?
American Idiot was released in September of 2004.
American Idiot debuted at #1, sold 267,000 records the first week.
I always thought the Dookie was their tour de force, And then here they are 10 years later to make their great record. That's really something.
The 47th Annual Grammy Award.
When the Grammy nominations started coming in for the record, it was incredible.
And the Grammy goes to American Idiot, Green Day.
I almost jumped out of my skin when they called Green Day's name for Best Rock Record. It was awesome.
We were so happy. It was very exciting.
Rock and roll can be dangerous and fun at the same time, so thanks a lot.
They really felt like that people had taken notice, and it really showed that 10 years later, this could be a band that is actually more like the Rolling Stones than like the Ramones.
It's a huge challenge to try to maintain mega stardom. The best you can do is sort of continue following your own heart and your own vision and inspiration.
Where you go, I'll be there.
And like we've seen with American Idiot, the world comes around again if you just are true to who you are.
They've never been people to look to the outside for approval of what they did.
It's always been them against the world.
They don't care what people think. They didn't get to this point by kissing anyone's ass.
To see it go from almost not being a band to the heights, it's actually an amazing life story.
They're all still incredibly excited by what they do.
I think their drive is more intense now than ever.
They've gotten back to doing exactly what they do best, which is just make really great music.
I wonder